Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So we're back here with Al Islah's Let's Chat series. Today we will have Sheikh Nami Farhat with us, and we'll be discussing, analyzing historical accounts of Karbala using Sanad and Matn. So without further ado, I will introduce him as we continue this conversation, and he will be able to tell us a little bit more in between everything. Sheikh, welcome to the Let's Chat series.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you. So briefly, I think, let me just go straight to what you are doing right now. Currently, you are the head of the Al-Zahra College in Sydney.
Yep. Head of Islamic studies, not the whole college, the Islamic studies.
Right. Okay. And also you are doing counseling.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about this counseling thing that you're doing?
So with the high school students, especially right now with lockdown, we've been locked down for a long time. We decided to start a counseling team, or to establish a counseling team in the school in order to follow the well-being of the students. And seeing that I had the opportunity to study mental health and individual support after returning from the Hawza, they asked me to join that team. And Alhamdulillah, we have one-on-one sessions with the certain students. And also we have a weekly program with the students where we try to help them with their mental health.
Yeah, which is a key thing right now, I think, mental health with COVID and everything. Yeah, and I hope these series, because it's a chat, it's just a very casual sort of thing, it becomes interesting for the youth and of course the adults to listen to. So without further ado, as a layman, how would you define Sanad and Matn before we get into the analyzing the history?
When it comes to the Islamic books or the Islamic narrations that we have, you always find these two terms. The Sanad, referring to the chain of the narration. So each narration, there are a group of narrators who narrate to us. The collection, if you want, of these narrators together, we call this a sanad. We look who narrated from who all the way to go back to the Imam alayhi salam or to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is the sanad. While the Matn is to look at the content of this narration, to look at the narration itself, what does it say? And then we study it. So for the scholars, usually to rely upon a textual proof, they have to study the sanad to see whether it's authentic, and then they have to also study the Matn to see whether it's authentic or not.
And so, there is a chain of narrations, so you have a line of people you can go back to and follow through. So that's understood. But if you have content, if you have Matn, but you don't know the narrators, could it still be used in an argument?
Well, it depends in what subject. If you're studying, for example, a jurisprudence topic when it comes to fiqh, then it's a problem in most of the cases to rely upon a narration that doesn't have an authentic chain. But when it comes to the authenticity of the chain or the sanad, it's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. To just look at the narrators and see this is fiqh, not fiqh, authentic, not authentic. It's not like that. Because in some cases you might have an authentic narration by the chain, but the Matn is weak because it contradicts with the Quran. So you can't then take it just because the sanad is authentic. So there's a certain process where you have to join between studying the sanad and also studying the environment that this narration was said in to look at the Matn. That's why I said you need to study both of them and then return it to the Quran.
So this is for fiqh, but for history, how does that work then?
Yeah, so that's what the fiqh. Most of the cases you only rely on authentic narrations. There's certain minor rulings that they might rely on weak narrations here and there, but mostly authentic. While when it comes to history, history is always written by those in power. The winners are the ones that write history. And the Shia in general, the Shia school of thought, were never in history. We have certain dynasties, let's call them in history, the Buwayhi, the Safawi, and then now like the Islamic Republic. But throughout history, we were never in power, which didn't allow us to write enough history, authentic history, and even many of the books that were written in history are missing today due to the oppression that took place. So this will lead us to either have no history at all or to find a way to see how much we can accept from the stories that we have or the narrations that we read in history. This is where they came up with the idea of accepting certain weak narrations if they come from multiple sources. All right? So let's say there's a weak narration from path A, a weak narration from path B, a weak narration from path C and D, and so on. So different, multiple, even if each one is weak, but together, you join them together, and then you say it is possible that there's something happened in the past.
So it's a historical jigsaw puzzle, technically.
Kind of. Or based on the possibility or probability theory. That it's more possible that there's something happened because it was narrated from so many different ways, right? And about the exact same story. So, for example, if today someone comes and tell you Iraq was occupied by a certain country, right? You say this man doesn't pray, he's weak. Then another one comes and say to you Iraq was occupied in a certain year. You say, oh, he drinks wine, I can't take it. And the third, fourth one. Then when you collect all of them, you say, no, it's not possible that all of them are lying. This is the process that they follow.
So, okay. And all right, so you were born in Australia.
Yes.
In Sydney. And you were educated in Islamic studies in Iran, at the Islamic Hausa, and then you went to Lebanon from there.
Yes.
All right. And you have a bachelor's in political science and psychology? Philosophy. Excellent. All right. So, and this one you got in the University of Lebanon in Beirut. Okay.
Correct.
All right. So, I mean, we're just trying to, put things together so that we also know who you are. But yeah.
Well, once someone told me when I read what you've studied, it sounds very complicated. Before you even talk, I'm lost.
No, but I mean, education is an arc, so you can get it from everywhere. But yeah, so let's get into analyzing the historical accounts of Karbala. What sort of narrations do we have, and how many people have historically put it together?
You'll find many narrations. It's very interesting about Karbala or the incident of Ashura, the incident of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Probably you'll find, comparing to other incidents that took place in history, most narrations that speaks about Ashura in the books of both school of thoughts. In fact, some scholars, even from Shia and Sunnis, they consider Ashura to be a prophecy from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. because they narrated certain narrations that the Prophet ﷺ informed people about this tragedy. And you'll find authentic narrations. But also keep in mind what I said at the beginning, the authenticity of the chain doesn't mean that these narrations are authentic. But they do consider it to be a prophecy, and this is why they emphasize and concentrate on it a lot. Our scholars believe that the first one that collected all these narrations together, all the stories of Karbala, was Asbahs al-Najashi. Al-Shuja'i, I said his name wrong. Al-Asbahs bin Nubata. Al-Asbahs bin Nubata was one of the companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And they believe he lived a long life where he witnessed the time of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and he wrote a book about it, Al-Asbahs bin Nubata. But we didn't, or this book didn't reach us. So today there's no book for him to rely on it. The second book that was written about this maqtal was for Abi Mikhnaf, Lut bin Yahya, one of the people that lived during the time of the Imams alayhi salam, collected the stories in his book. And it is common until today. Whatever you read today or you hear today, they attribute it to the book of Abi Mikhnaf. Yeah.
So are these the only two sort of books that, I mean, one you say didn't even reach us, but so we only have Abi Mikhnaf's Makata?
Yeah, so these are the first two books that were written specifically as a maqtal for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Okay, and even Abi Mikhnaf, it didn't reach us. And so whatever you have today that is commonly known as Maqtal Abi Mikhnaf, which is published in the book places, in the libraries, in the centers sometimes, it's not for Abi Mikhnaf. There's no evidence that this book that we have is the same book that was written by Abi Mikhnaf. But then later on in history, you'll find some scholars who added part of the maqtal in their book. So they didn't specifically write a book about the maqtal, a specific book like the Mikhnaf or Al-Asbahs bin Nubata. No, they added it in the book. For example, Sheikh al-Saduq in Al-Amali, he added, for example, part of the maqtal his book. Al-Sheikh al-Mufid in Al-Irshad, he added part speaking about the different Imams alayhi salam. When it comes to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he added the part. Al-Tabari in his from the Sunni school, Al-Tabari in his Tariq, in the Kitab al-Rusul wal-Muluk, he mentions the maqtal of Imam al-Hussein, but not as a separate book. When he spoke about the incidents of years 60 and 61 after Hijrah, he mentioned the incident of Karbala and the maqtal of Abi Abdullah. And also there's other Tabaqat al-Kubra for Ibn Sa'ad and other scholars. They mention the maqtal but as part of the book, not as a separate book. So originally there was two maqtals originally. Later on in history, other people started writing maqatil, but the main two sources were Al-Asbahs bin Nubata, which we don't have any connection to it, and then Abi Mikhnaf. Abi Mikhnaf is the main source that is followed until today, although it didn't reach us. When I say it didn't reach us, I mean the original book didn't reach us.
Didn't reach us.
Yeah.
When was Asbahs bin Nubata's book written, and when was Abi Mikhnaf's Maqatil written?
So the Asbahs bin Nubata after the incident of Karbala.
Soon after, or
Soon after.
was it after a few years?
not longer. I don't have the exact date about Asbah bin Nabata, but it was soon after. Because remember, he's one of the companions, or he believed to be one of the companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So he was in an old age in Karbala. He's 61, or during the incident of Karbala. So it's not many years after Karbala he wrote it, but it didn't reach us today. So exactly what he said in that book, the story that he mentioned, it would have been more authentic than any other book, because he probably narrated directly from those who witnessed the incident of Karbala. While Abi Mithna, he lived during the time of he witnessed the Imam in the time of Imam al-Sadiq, Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq, and Imam al-Qadim. So at the end of the Umayyad empire, and at the beginning of the Abbasi Khilafah. This is the time where Abi Mikhnaf lived, and he wrote his book during the time of the Abbasi Khilafah.
So could we say that Abi Mikhnaf related stories from Imam Zainul Abidin and Imam Muhammad Baqir, probably?
So the thing is, we don't have the authentic or the original book to come and judge Abi Mikhnaf. But if we're studying history, we can look at this personality and study it from different aspects to see whether it was possible for him that he narrated from the Imams alayhim salam or not. When you look in history, besides the incident of Karbala, you'll find that although Abi Mikhnaf lived during the time of 4 Imams, but he never narrated one narration from them.
Oh.
Although I have to say, before I go in depth about him, he is someone that is praised a lot by scholars. And it's interesting that he's praised from both school of thought sometimes. So by some Shia scholars he's praised, and by some Sunni scholars he's also praised and considered to be a scholar or a thiqah, or an authentic person. Although some scholars from both school of thought also weaken him. Some Shia say he's from Ahlul Hadith, from the Sunni groups of Ahlul Hadith, and the Ahlul Hadith, they say no, he is Shia. So everyone is throwing him to a different side. But it's interesting that we don't see him narrating from the Imams alayhim salam. Now, to defend him, some scholars said that Abi Mikhnaf is not a scholar. He wasn't a scholar.
Oh.
They say Abi Mikhnaf was a historian only. So there's a difference between a scholar as in a faqih or as a historian. So they said his job was not to narrate narrations from the Imams alayhim salam. His job was to narrate history. Okay? And he was, because he's originally from Kufa, from Iraq, his let's call it his specialty in history was about the history of Iraq.
You're right.
Yeah. But with that, it makes more sense for someone of Abi Mikhnaf, if he wants to narrate, to seek the narrations from the Imams alayhim salam, especially Imam Zayn al-Abidin that witnessed Karbala. If he wasn't like old enough during his time, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, the Ahlul Bayt, they would know more about it, but we don't find any connection between them. And keep in mind that Abi Mikhnaf, historically, like the family is linked to the Ahlul Bayt, because Mikhnaf, his grandfather Mikhnaf, is one of the companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And he fought with him the 3 battles, Siffin, Nahrawan, and Al-Jamal. And 2 of his brothers, Mikhnaf brothers, were killed in Ma'arakat al-Jamal. So they were very connected to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Right? But with that, we find something different when it comes to Abi Mikhnaf. During the time of the Abbasi Khilafah, we find that he didn't narrate any narration from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam.
Okay, I want to pull you back to you said that Saduq and Mufid and even Tabari have actually quoted from these books.
Yep.
So they were available until then.
Yeah. So the Saduq and the Mufid, that's not a long time, not long ago. They narrated that. The one that narrated the earliest one that narrated was a Tabari from the book of Abi Mikhnaf. So whatever you read today from the Abi Mikhnaf Maqtal comes from At-Tabari. He was the one that narrated, and everyone narrated from At-Tabari, or most of them, to be accurate, most of them narrated from At-Tabari. Okay, At-Tabari, he narrated the story of Abi Mikhnaf. Some people say, some scholars say, through a book that he had. They say he had the original book of Abi Mikhnaf.
Okay.
Right? But we don't have evidence for that. Although he was living also during the time of the Abbasi Khilafah, right? At-Tabari. But there's no evidence that he had the original book of Abi Mikhnaf. And also he uses the At-Tabari we find in when he mentions the Maqtal, he doesn't say that he had the book. He says, it was narrated to me. All right? So it was in the process of narration, of hearing it. Because the story of Karbala was narrated verbally and then it was written in the books. So it was narrated to him. There must be a connection between At-Tabari and between Abi Mikhnaf. A connection. We'll go back to the sanad, to the chain. The problem is when we look at At-Tabari, we find that he was born in the year 224. The only connection that they say, they claim, is through Hisham al-Kalbi, one of the students of Abi Mikhnaf. They say Hisham al-Kalbi is the one that narrated to At-Tabari. But we find that Hisham died in 206. Okay, so there was no connection between, how is there a connection between At-Tabari, the one who was born in year 224, and between Hisham, who died in 206? He died before he was even born. So it doesn't make sense. Right? There's a problem in the sanad there. Now, some scholars, even in the Sunni school of thought, they said no. At-Tabari, at the beginning of the first volume of his Tariq, he mentioned that there is a chain between him and Al-Kalbi. He said that Al-Harith bin Muhammad, one of the narrators, is the one that connects him to Al-Kalbi, Hisham al-Kalbi. Okay? And then he starts using the process of, again, Ahlul Hadith. He says, Haddithtu, because he already mentioned the chain. Same as Al-Kulayni in Al-Kafi, sometimes he does the same thing. Right? Because he already mentioned the chain. So he says, they call it At-Ta'liq in Ilm al-Rijal. So it's already mentioned. This is the line, if you want, that connects At-Tabari to Abi Mikhnaf. So based on that, we say, all right, there was a sanad. If we accept this process, that there is a man in the middle, because they always create a man in the middle to connect people, Al-Harith bin Muhammad, to connect At-Tabari to Al-Kalbi and then to Abi Mikhnaf. All right. With that, we say, where's the proof, or where's the evidence that everything that At-Tabari mentioned is the same information that Abi Mikhnaf had in his book?
That's a very good question.
Is there evidence for that? They say, because now I have to give always the two opinions to be fair. They say no. At-Tabari, he tried his best to mention different chains for each incident. So he didn't only limit the chain to one through Al-Kalbi. All right, and this This is possible, but then it shows that it's not all from Abi Mikhnaf. It's not all from Abi Mikhnaf. So to say that what exists in At-Tabari is the same story that Abi Mikhnaf wrote down, there's no proof for that. And this is something that our scholars also agree upon. Although, like, if you look, for example, Agha Buzurg al-Tahrani in his book Al-Dari'a, for example, he says that the book Abi Mikhnaf that he wrote, it doesn't exist today. Okay, and the only thing that we have is what At-Tabari narrates. What At-Tabari narrates. But to prove that what At-Tabari narrates is from Abi Mikhnaf, there's a problem in that.
And then let's go back to Asbah bin Nubata. So his book, the one that he wrote, which seems to be like the most authentic the historical sort of pickup of the day of Ashura, because he was there probably, as we've said.
Not in Karbala, there in Karbala, but he was during that time.
So he wasn't in Karbala.
No, he was during the time of the incident of Karbala.
Okay, so then so he gets the stories and then puts it together from there.
Yes, so because he was living during the time of certain people that attended the incident of Karbala, so they narrated these stories. Like they mentioned the name Hameed ibn Muslim and some other people that left from the army of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. They say they narrated these stories and people started narrating them. Now, Al-Asbah bin Nubata, did he let's say interview those who came out from Karbala? I don't know, because we don't have any source for his book. So I don't know the process that he followed. Did he just narrate what he used to hear, for example, from people? Because that was also something common. Did he narrate from the Imams alayhi salam? Also, I don't know. So we can't come and say how or the process that he wrote his book. And this is why it has no value to come and say, Al-Asbah bin Nubata wrote a maqtal, may Allah reward him. But we have nothing today to benefit from it. Okay? The only thing that we can benefit is if we can prove that there's a connection between At-Tabari and Abi Mikhnaf, and to prove that what he narrates is exactly what Abi Mikhnaf narrated.
So, okay, I'm getting thrown off here because now you're telling me that there's only one sort of source that we are targeted towards or focused on, and it's the only one thing that we have, and still it's like you said, it's a historian's narration.
Yes. So it goes back to Abi Mikhnaf, but there's probably different ways. So, for example, if you look at the turuq, they call it at-tariq, the path of At-Tabari to Abi Mikhnaf would be different than, for example, the path of Ibn A'tham al-Kufi in Al-Futuh to Abi Mikhnaf. Different than the path of Sheikh al-Mufid, for example, that he claims to Hisham al-Kalbi, although there's a problem in the chain, right? But it's different path. But it all goes back to that original source, because there was no other source other than Abi Mikhnaf. Because we are sure that he wrote a book. So 100% we know that Abi Mikhnaf wrote a book. Okay, it existed. That's why they have to connect back to that only source, because there's no other source for it.
Sheikh, if I was in a war that happened,
yes,
and if I came out of there, I would at least pen down something. I would at least tell some people something. Are you trying to tell me that Imam Zainul Abidin or Imam Ahmad Bakir or even Bibi Zainab, when she was there and she saw everything, nobody actually sat down and wrote what had happened, or nobody asked?
Let's start with nobody wrote down. No, we don't have between our hands, or no one even claimed that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the Imams alayhim salam, wrote an actual separate book about the Maqtal or about the incidents of Karbala. And this was not, if you look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam in general, you don't find that they wrote books in general, whether it be about the Maqtal or anything else. So did they narrate some of the incidents of Karbala? If they did, it didn't reach us. There's a claim, one of the claims only, from the Maqtal, from that Sheikh al-Saduq mentions in Al-Amal. He attributes this Maqtal to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Right? But obviously the chain is weak. And even the Matn of this narration contradicts with the other stories that we hear from the Maqtal. So we can't rely on it. It's not written as a separate Maqtal. It's written in Al-Amali. The chain is weak, can't be accepted. Even with the flexibility in history, it still can't be accepted. And the Matn, it contradicts with the other stories that we hear in the Maqatil, in certain parts of it. So there's no evidence that they wrote any books, or they concentrated that much on mentioning the details of the incident.
So during the 12 days of the first 12 days of Muharram, we have all these narrations, all these stories being told to us about what happened, how it happened, what transpired, and all this. Where does this come from?
It comes from the book that is attributed to Abi Mikhnaf. So today in let's call it the Shia, in the Shia religious environment, you'll find two books for Abi Mikhnaf. Mm-hmm. One book, the first book for Abi Mikhnaf, is a book that claims that it is the original book that was written by this scholar. So it's published in the shops, you find it. It says this is the original book.
Okay.
And some people, unfortunately, they still use it in the centers, in the mosque, they still use it. And it's funny, when you open it, it says حدثنا الكليني, that Al-Kulayni narrates to us. And where's Al-Kulayni and where's Abi Mikhnaf? Kulayni wasn't even born back then, right? But they don't even concentrate on that.
So hold on, when was Kulayni born?
Al-Kulayni lived during the time of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam.
So 11.
And he witnessed the minor occultation of the Shia. So Abi Mikhnaf lived during the time of Imam al-Qadim and Imam al So there's a big gap between them. But they narrate this. This is one of the books that you'll find. And all our scholars, the Shia scholars, they condemn this book and they say this is a lie and it shouldn't be attributed to Abi Mikhnaf. All the scholars, even Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi, the author of Mafatih al-Jinan, Sayyid Abdul Hussein Sharaf al-Din, all the main scholars, they consider this book to be a lie, people attributing a lie to Abi Mikhnaf. Then you have another book called Maqtal al-Husayn. Mm-hmm. Some historians or some scholars like Sheikh al-Gharawi and other scholars, they came and decided to join or to collect different narrations from At-Tabari, from Al-Amali of Sheikh al-Saduq, from Al-Irshad of Sheikh al-Mufid, and to join between them and to try their best to make up this story together, to the best of their ability. Because again, we said history, it's all weak. Right. So they tried to the best of their ability to filter the Maqtal from certain stories that are attributed to the Imams alayhim salam, or to the Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or certain stories that are illogical in certain maqatil that are mentioned. And may Allah reward them for that act, for trying to filter the story of Karbala or Ashura to the best of their ability, and to reject the illogical stories that are mentioned in some places.
This is a little bit because it's confusing me that, despite having such you have, like you said, the prophet, there's hadith that say that the prophet has discussed and has put mention on the tragedy. So
Yes.
how is it that it's not being connected in any way?
Look, we have to see the way the Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam used to work. If you study their lives from the first Imam to the last one, you'll find that they never worked on restricting people to the past or concentrating on history that much. So although they connected people to history,
Right.
but not narrative history. That makes sense. So not to just narrating things and stories and making people drugged by the stories of the past and unaware of their present and their future. So we find that Ahlul alayhi salam always concentrating on the present time and planning for the future, and building around them a group of companions and people to be able to be active in their present and their future and to build a better future, right? And maybe I'm saying this is the reason why they didn't write books of history or even narrations or even that. They used to connect them back to the Quran and make them live a logical, active present. And this is why, now I don't want to go too much in depth about it, but this is why you can draw a question mark about the time the Maqtal of Imam al-Hussein was written with its details. Because the Maqtal of Imam al-Hussein was written with all these details during the time of the Abbasi Khilafah, or in fact at the beginning of the Abbasi Khilafah. And let's say there's an accusation for Abi Mikhnaf, not me saying it, but some scholars believe there's an accusation of Abi Mikhnaf working for the Abbasis. And At-Tabari is known to be very close to the Abbasis also. Right? So these two pillars of the Maqtal of Imam al-Hussein today, Abi Mikhnaf and At-Tabari, were connected to the Abbasis somehow. According to some scholars, even Shia scholars, they believe in Abi Mikhnaf being connected to them. Now, remember that the Abbasis, to overthrow Bani Umayyah and control the Islamic nation, they had to hold the flag of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Because they are the cousins of Banu Hashim. So Banu al-Abbas are the cousins of Banu Hashim, and they started the Tharat al-Hussein. We want to take revenge for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Okay. So to use that story of Ashura, to use that story of Imam al-Hussein for their own benefit, maybe as one of the opinions, let's say in history, they encouraged Abi Mikhnaf or later on At-Tabari to concentrate on the details of these stories. But the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they didn't do that. Although it doesn't mean they forgot about Karbala or Ashura, tragedy of Imam Hussein, but they looked at it in a different way.
I'll come back to how they looked at it. But I want to ask you another question. Do
Yes.
we have narrations of any of the Imams going back to Karbala during Ashura or during Muharram?
I haven't seen any authentic narration speaking specifically about the Imams alayhi salam going back to Ashura, to Karbala during Muharram to visit on the 10th or on the Arba'in. I haven't seen any narrations that we can rely upon speaking about that. And usually we have narration them encouraging people to go to Karbala to visit Imam Hussein, but for them to go, I haven't seen such narrations.
Okay, so go back to what you said last. How did they view Karbala? What was their understanding, or what was their learning from it?
Look, the Shia school of thought in general was built on two foundations. There's two foundations for the Shia school of thought, or let's call them two pillars: holiness and oppression. Two important pillars or foundations that they hold fast to even until today. From the beginning of the Tashayyu until today, they present the concept of having an imam or a leader that is holy, that is most pure, sincere, pious, and so on. And these positive characteristics, they attracted people that didn't believe in, let's say, in the imam of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, the same way the Shia believe in it. But because they saw this holiness and purity and sincerity in the lives of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, they were attracted to them. Let it be Muslims or even non-Muslims sometimes. You know, they were attracted to these positive characters, attributes of the imams. And then you have the oppression to recruit people and to have power in this opposition party that existed throughout history in the Islamic nation. They needed to have something to use, which was the oppression of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So the whole story and concept of Ashura, the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, looked at it as a political stance from an opposition party against the oppressors that were in authority. This is how they looked at it. And this also, by the way, explains the narrations that we read and are very famous in the books of Shia about the ziyarah, the recommendation of the ziyarah, the wujub, the ziyarah being wajib in certain places. It was all due to the political stance that the Imams alayhim salam took in using Karbala and the memory of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam as a political stance against the government back then. And from here you understand the reward of this ziyarah in some places, mentioning better than 100 hajj, 1,000 hajj every step, because it was considered as a type of jihad against the oppressors, right? So this is why if jihad, yes, obviously 100% it's better than hajj, if it's jihad. It's better than anything else if it's fighting, enjoining good and forbidding evil, let's call it, to be politically correct now. Okay. But we can't come and say the same reward can be applied today. If someone is going to visit Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, right, on a holiday and walking, you can't say you're walking, every step you take is equal to 1,000 hajj. No, it's not equal to even half a hajj.
You know, this thing about attributing ziyarah to hajj and umrah and whatever.
Yes.
I haven't seen anywhere where there is any specific narrations where the Imams have said that this is there. I've seen a whole listing of Imam Jafar Sadiq said this and Imam Ahmad Bakr said this, but the source is a single source, which is Kamilul Ziyarat, which I also had a question mark on. And you know, most of the narrators and orators will say that, oh, why are you saying that, you know, God cannot give you one hajj and one ziyarah if you go, one hajj and one umrah if you go and visit Imam Hussein's shrine. And I feel like we're putting a price on God. We're telling him to give us this if we go and visit Imam Hussein, because it's not written anywhere either. He hasn't said it. We are literally putting words into into the Lord's mouth. So I find it very odd that there's no content, and so it kind of baffles me. I don't know what's your intake or outtake on this.
So I think most people who would aggressively fight for the concept of having a reward would base it on certain narrations that they read. Especially that Kamil Ziyad is classified by some scholars to be an authentic book, and everything mentioned in it to be authentic. In fact, even one of the great Shia Maraja, Sayyid al-Khou'i rahmatullah alayhi, used to believe in the authenticity of that book for a very long time. But at the end of his life, he changed his opinion about the authenticity of that book. So he doesn't say the whole book is authentic, although you'll find many narrations in Kamil Ziyarat that are authentic. Like when from the Sanad, when looking at the chain, many narrations are authentic. Also, especially about Karbala, or about, for example, crying on Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, and so on, or the ziyarah of Abi Abdullah. So they would fight aggressively due to the narrations that exist. Now, for us, if we want to look at it from a moral aspect, as you said, we shouldn't put a price for God. Not only that, if you claim to love Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, you should go for the sake of this love. When you love someone, you don't go to visit them just to receive a reward or money. You go out of this love, to show love to them. This is number one. Number two, we have to study the environment that these narrations were narrated in. And this is a big problem, a major problem that exists in our Islamic intellectual environments. Let it be the Shia or the Sunnis, they all have the same problem. They look at the narration without looking at the environment that it was set in. So they study the Sanad, the Matn, in a very dry method, and they don't look at the environment that this narration was set in. But for me personally, usually when I want to study any topic, I try to read the narrations all together and look at the environment that it was set in. And this is why I believe that all these rewards mentioned were done for a political reason, for the political stance that the Imams alayhi salam took through the ziyarah of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. And this is why they made it obligatory in a certain period of time on people to go, although there was danger, certain threat on the lives of people, but with that they encouraged them to go as a political stance. That was the only way for them to stand against the government back then, And this is why I said you can't compare the reward that was mentioned back then in a certain circumstances and environment to today. If I want to be clearer or more clear, those, for example, who were walking to Karbala, right, for 2 days, and ISIS was taking over Iraq, obviously they want to get a reward of 1,000 Hajj, because that was just a holiday that they went to.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So the content that we have, leave aside the sanad, the content that we have right now, if you were told how much of it is authentic, how much of it is actually real, could you like give us an idea?
Percentage-wise, I can't be that accurate when I say it, but probably less than, if I want to be also very merciful in my opinion, less than 40% is authentic. And that me being kind to say that. Right? Because we said, if everything goes back to, or the main source is Abi Mikhnaf, and the book is not there, right? Then the only thing that we have is the only thing that we can rely upon, the different ways that these scholars connect to Abi Mikhnaf. So, for example, the way of Sheikh al-Mufid, the way of Ibn Sa'ad, for example, in Al-Tabaqat, the way of At-Tabari. So when you have different ways, you reach something that is called tawatur in history, right? So you have 3, 4, 5 different groups or ways, even if they are weak, you can accept it. If there is tawatur in the story that they narrate. If there is tawatur. But the problem is, sometimes there's no tawatur. So, for example, I'll give you an example. In some stories, they say, as an example only, they say, Sayyidah Zainab alayha salam, when in the last moments, when before Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam was killed, Sayyidah Zainab was next to him. Okay? And the shimmer was pushing her and so on. In another narration, in another story, he Sayyidah Zainab in the tent with Imam Ali ibn al-Husayn alayhi salam. In the third story, you read Zainab is on top of the hill.
Yes.
On top of it. This is a contradiction.
Right.
To save this contradiction, because you can't say there's tawatur anymore here and use the tricks of history to authenticate the story with this contradiction, they said, oh, okay, to find a solution, they said, let us make Zainab al-Kubra, Zainab al-Sughra, and Zainab al-Wusta. So we have Zainab, 3 Zainabs, different names. So Kulthum is called Zainab al-Sughra, Sayyidah Zainab is called Zainab al-Kubra, and then they say it's possible that one of the daughters of Imam al-Husayn was called Zainab al-Wusta or something like that. Right? Why? Just to join between them. And also we say, how did you know that it was Sayyidah Zainab? You narrate that Sayyidah Zainab alayha salam was covered. How did you distinguish Sayyidah Zainab from Kulthum? How did you distinguish Kulthum from Rabah? How do you know that? You know? So this is why I say it's not easy to just say, oh, it was narrated from different ways, so we accept it. Because this is the method that is used by some people. They just say, oh, there's tawatur, let's see. Why would you doubt history? And if there's tawatur, the scholars accept tawatur. They accept tawatur when there's no contradictions between the story. Right? But when there's a contradiction, it's a problem.
Okay. You just reminded me of something which I've heard ever since I was a young child during these majlises, where you have the fire that catches on the dress of Bibi Sikina, and as she's going into the field, there is a man who says, "Stop! Let me extinguish this fire." I think he's given the name Hameed or something like that.
He's the Muslim, the one that narrates the story, yes.
So, if he's narrating the story, where is he narrating from, and why don't we have his book?
That's the thing. So, one of the people that collected the narrations of Hameed, or believed that he connected the narrations of Hameed ibn Muslim, was Abi Mukhnaf. He was the one that collected them. So it goes back to the source, Abi Mukhnaf. Right? That's why we don't have it. And we don't have the book. So if you can prove that some of what is mentioned in At-Tabari is for Abi Mukhnaf, then yes, you can say some of the stories are from Hameed ibn Muslim. And it is sad. Look, it's sad when some respected brothers from the scholars, they aggressively fight when you say no, what is mentioned in At-Tabari is not all from Abi Mukhnaf. No, you're doubting, you're creating doubt. And it's, I don't know what to say. Do you accept everything? Would you dare to accept everything that is mentioned in At-Tabari from the story of Imam al-Husayn? The problem is probably that they didn't read the story from At-Tabari. They just narrate the parts that were added to the book of Maqtal Imam al-Husayn. But I'll give you one example. Although there are many examples from At-Tabari to show the political connections that he had with the Abbasis. But I'll give you one example. At-Tabari, he mentions from Abi Mukhnaf, he says that when the news reached Yazid ibn Muawiyah that Al-Husayn ibn Ali alayhi salam was killed, At-Tabari says that Yazid sat down and he started crying. And he said, why would they kill Imam Al-Husayn ibn Ali? What have they done in killing Al-Husayn ibn Ali? This is in At-Tabari. Okay. Do you accept that? Do you accept that from At-Tabari? Do you accept that At-Tabari narrates from Abi Mikhnaf? Then accept that Yazid is innocent from the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And then it was Ibn Ziyad and Amr ibn Sa'ad, they took the decision. This is something that is used even by some of the Wahhabis or some of the Ahlul Hadith today, the Salafis. They say when they defend Yazid bin Muawiyah, they say Yazid didn't kill Imam al-Hussein. Why? Based on the story that is mentioned in At-Tabari. So as a Shia scholar, you want to come and tell me, don't create doubts in the authenticity of what is mentioned in At-Tabari. All right, then accept that, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you.
So we are picking and choosing.
Yes. Picking and choosing. If you want to accept what At-Tabari says and take it authentic, accept everything. Unless you do what some of our scholars did, like Ayatollah al-Gharawi, for example, one of the historians, and other scholars too. They come and they look at the different sources and the different stories, and they try their best, because this is the only things that they have. So they try their best to choose, let's say, the most authentic stories, right, and put it down together.
You know, I'm sure there's so much more, so many examples that you can give in terms of just, you know, like when you're analyzing the history of this. I mean, Karbala is very close to all of us. Imam Hussein is very close to all of us. But not being sure about what is being narrated, who's narrating it, it really, you know, like we need to learn how the Imams dealt with Karbala and how they looked at the whole situation. And then, like you said, you have to look at the environment also as to what decisions they made at what time, in terms of like making going to ziyarah something that everybody should do. But like you were saying, it was for a reason. How do we learn this? And that's my final question. Where do we learn this from?
Well, that's a very long question. It needs a very long answer. So hopefully I'll try to cut it short. There's no doubt, as you said, the story of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is very detailed. And I believe no matter what you hear or what is said, it's not going to change the love that we have and this heat that we have in our hearts to Abu Abdullah alayhi salam.
Right.
And it hurts when some people start accusing of being against Imam al-Hussein or against even the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And Allah knows, maybe our love to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam is more than the love of anyone else to them. So we shouldn't be accusing or doubting the love of people to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. In general, let it be the Shia, Sunnis, or even some non-Muslims. You'll find some non-Muslims who love the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam more than themselves. For example, I mentioned this story, one of the writers in Lebanon, his name is George Jordaq. He wasn't even Muslim, he was Christian. And he wrote a book called Ali, The Sound of Justice, or The Voice of Justice. Right? He was offered thousands of dollars to write a similar book about another personality in Islamic history. And he said to the people, he said, my pen can't write about anyone after it wrote about Ali ibn Abi Talib. Although he was Christian. So the love that we have for the Ahlul Bayt, for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, nothing can change it. And no matter what we say, no doubt will take place in the love that we have. And in the great tragedy that the tragedy of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Also, I say from a practical level, leave all the narrations, leave all the history, all the disasters that you'll find in At-Tabari, in Abi Mikhnaf, in the relations that they had with the Abbas, leave everything. From a practical level, I say, Karbala, the memory of Abi Abdullah was the best thing that took place for the Shia in history, and especially for us today. Through the message of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, and through the movement of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, we were able to survive. We were able to defend ourselves. We were able to become, alhamdulillah, today a power that can stand in front of most of the arrogant powers in this world. Through the message of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. This is the practical side or the positive side of Abi Abdullah. And I don't want to become very emotional, but we are the people of Hussein alayhi salam. We are from those who understand the message of Abi Abdullah and who lived the message practically, and not only through theories and through doing a circle of latim in a majlis and through crying and jumping up and down. No, practically we lived the message of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. Okay, so just to say that before I go to the next part, I have to defend myself. So when it comes to the story of Ashura, the details are not that important. The details are not that important. So I had to build an introduction to get here. The details are not important. This is why we found Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam didn't concentrate on the details. They concentrated on the tragedy itself, which is the martyrdom of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. They commemorated the martyrdom of Abi Abdullah through showing sadness, through crying, which is an emotional theme. You don't need to make up stories. You don't need to make Imam al-Hussein or Abu al-Fadl alayhi salam as a superhero and flying on a horse just to make people cry. No. Say the story as it is. Enough to say that al-Hussein alayhi salam was slaughtered. This is enough for people to cry. Because it is deep down in our hearts, this love for Abi Abdullah. So there's no need for details. And the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they used to commemorate through crying, through being sad during that moment or that day of the 10th, and through using, this is the most important commemoration, through using the movement of Abi Abdullah to have an active followers who are living their present in a logical way, and those who are planning for the future. This is how they commemorate, and not through Matn and through having 2-3 months of aza where you stop your life and you live in a depressed environment for 3-4 months of your life, and you go to a place and you hear nonsense stories up and down every year. Right? This is not how we commemorate. Honestly, a few years before COVID, it's been 2 years now, before COVID, I was sitting in one of the centers and there was a speaker saying a story about Karbala. I looked at the Sayyid, there's a Sayyid sitting next to me. I said, where did he bring up this story from? I've never heard it in my life. Like every year, some people are adding to the story. We saw enough the lies that we have in history. Today, there are more lies about the incident of Karbala. This is why I don't concentrate on the details. And it's impossible. It's impossible to authenticate the details of Ashura that I mentioned. Abi Mikhnaf or At-Tabari, how did they record the poetry that was said in Karbala? Every warrior going out and saying a certain poem. Where did they narrate it from? Or they record it from? Or let's say when let's say Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam standing with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam inside the tent, and Imam al-Hussein said 1, 2, 3. Or where did who heard them saying this? Did Sayyidah Zainab narrate the story or not? There's no evidence. How would you say? How did they distinguish, as we said, who is Zainab, who is Kulthum? It's impossible for that to happen. How do you distinguish even who is the son of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam? Because in some maqatil it says Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan. In other maqatil it says Abdullah ibn al-Hasan. So there's 2 sons of Imam al-Hasan. Which one? And everyone said a different poem when he went out. So my intention when I speak about these topics is not to create doubt in the hearts of people. All right? And I don't want to weaken the love of people for Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. I speak about these issues to make them more firm in the message of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. Because if you keep these stories hidden, and you don't speak about them, when people find out about the weakness of these narrations, they will start doubting the whole message of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. So it's important as Shia scholars, and I concentrate on that, as Shia scholars, to stand and speak about the weak details of Ashura, or even the illogical superstitions that are done by the name of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, to strengthen the beliefs of people in the message of Abi Abdullah. Because if we keep going the way we are today, inshallah it will happen, but I can predict many people leaving religion altogether, and not only the Shia school of thought. This whole institution will collapse if it doesn't open to what's happening today, and be in a level where they can answer the questions of people. I'll talk too much about that.
No. You were right on point. I mean, our love for the Ahlul Bayt is what we need to hold on to. We need to live our lives like them, but not dwell on, like you said, the stories that keep on changing every year, that keep on getting added, and we should live the now and plan for the future. And of course, yes, we take a lot of courage, not only us, but we know of leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, who actually took the lessons from Imam Hussein and used it in his fight for the country. So, I mean, these are things that we should use, and it's a lesson. It's a lesson in how to deal with somebody who's oppressive. So, thank you so much for this.
100%. I believe, brother, that these details of the story will weaken the faith of people, and in the story itself. And we have heard people questioning, even in the Shia environment, some people questioning certain, not only details, certain incidents about Karbala, or questioning even the movement of Imam Hassan alayhi salam itself, because no one addressed yet the movement of Imam Hussein before Karbala, in Mecca, in Medina, during the time of Imam al-Hassan, after Imam al-Hassan and what he went through during that time till the year 61. No one yet answered these questions properly in order for us to understand how Imam al-Hussein went all the way to Karbala with a small group of people to face a whole army. Was it only just a prophecy that the Prophet said to him, you're going to be killed, and he saw in the dream that he's going to be killed? Then this is a suicide attempt of going there. To do what? To sacrifice himself for our sins. We become like Christians, right? They sacrificed him. Well, then what? Just to fulfill a dream? Then it's a personal thing. Or just to receive a level of shahada? Then it's a personal thing. This is why we need to study the Karbala and the movement of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam in a better way, and to look at it in a new way. And inshallah, I have this intention of studying the movement of Abi Abdullah before. I've done it in Arabic before a few years ago, but inshallah there's a plan to do it in English soon, this series of lectures about the movement of Abi Abdullah before. But it's important, instead of just going and concentrating on these rituals that are making people far away from the message of Abi Abdullah. Once, and sorry, I had to take long, but once there was a Japanese guy. He was doing a research about Islam, and he came to the centers to see the Shia, Sunnis, Muslims. But it's sad that he came in the wrong time. He came in Ashura, and he came to the center, and he was sitting down next to me. Then suddenly they turned the lights off, and they started screaming, took their shirts off, doing, Latam, beating their chest out with red lights. And he looked at me, he's like, what's going on here? I told him this is magic, black magic that we perform, and we have to sacrifice an infidel. So it's good that we have you here as a kafir to sacrifice him. So he got scared. He got scared. Now, talk to him about the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Would he be interested in it? Obviously not.
No.
Because of the scriptures that I perform. This is why I say we need to filter the way we commemorate. Or even one of the brothers asked me to mention that even one of the practices that we see is where they have a wedding for Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan alayhi salam incentives. They see them celebrating in the middle of Muharram, throwing lollies up and down that Al-Qasim got married in Karbala. What's this nonsense? Number one, it goes against the environment of sadness that you need to show for Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. Number two, there's no evidence for it. The story is mentioned in the book Al-Muntakhab for Al-Turayhi, and the book itself, there's a problem in the authenticity of it. Like, it's not proven that this book Al-Muntakhab is for Al-Turayhi, because it's full of linguistic and also historical mistakes. And Al-Turayhi was known to be a scholar, you know? So we can't accept these practices today that are done. Even when it goes to going out in a march in the middle of the city for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. What do you achieve from it? I know in certain countries it does have a positive outcome, right, you know, because it's a political stance. Let's say in Lebanon, for example, they go out in a march in Muharram, it's a political stance.
Yeah.
But here, once I've witnessed that, and I'll tell you from my own experience. I'm not narrating now to say there's a sanad. I'm narrating directly. So from me, we were in a march in the city, in Sydney. And one of them, it was at the beginning of ISIS, when ISIS came out and this whole thing. So someone was holding a banner. It says on it, Hussein is not a terrorist. And there's a non-Muslim guy, Australian guy, he's walking by. He said, look at these terrorists, they're defending Saddam Hussein. He thought they're speaking about Saddam Hussein. How is he going to know about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? He thought that Hussein is not a terrorist, referring to Saddam Hussein. Is that the message that you want to deliver to people? This is why we need to study, to be logical, and we need to study new ways of promoting this message in order to ensure that our children stay to be Husseinis in the future and to stay on the path of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam.
Indeed, indeed. Sheikh, let's chat again, inshallah, after you've done this reading that you're supposed to do, so that you can bring us a different outlook, different methodology on how people should, at least bring up our kids, so that, the love of Hussein will always be there, for sure, regardless of where you are, where you go. But let's do it right. Let's do it so that, it helps us in our future, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much for your time, for your knowledge and sharing your knowledge about this. I know we can go on and on, but I don't want to take so much of your time. But inshallah, let's keep this chat forum open. So whenever you feel like, let us know, and we will most certainly welcome you to have a chat.
Thank you very much, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your efforts. And inshallah, we can all, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ, we are all brothers, inshallah, in the path of Islam. Inshallah, we can all help each other and stand together in spreading the true message of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, and the true message of Rasulullah, and the true message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delivered to his Prophet alayhi salam. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank everybody who's watched this on the Islaah YouTube channel. Please don't forget to invite your friends, and always press the subscribe button. And whenever we have these new talks, whether it's Let's Chat or any conversation that we are having. If you'd like, important thing that you need to click on. Thank you very much, everybody, and mas salam.
Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing. Also click the bell icon and choose the all option to get notified for upcoming videos automatically.